Often when bad things happen, a saying springs up: never let history repeat itself. In the second book of Kings and the 2 books of Chronicles is just that, a repetition of history, and with that, the rise and fall of Jerusalem. So, welcome to Leah's Bible Babble History. The second book of Kings and the 2 books of Chronicles are in some way quite a depressing reading, and a lot of repeating things. You know, when you repeat something, you remember it often. The kingdoms has been divided into 2, Judea and Israel. I will not go into more details on that more than in the second Chronicles chapter 18 gives us. But first, some history. And we know certain things that is mentioned in the Bible thanks to that it still was the winner that writes the history. And after Solomon's death, civil war break out. Kings and leaders comes and goes throughout the whole books of Kings, hence the name, and is repeated in the Chronicles. To ease some of the fights here and there is some kind of trying to create alliances through marriage, but it fails miserably. And with that, the kingdom of Judea is up for grabs. And what a grab it will take. Assyria in the north and eventually Babylon in the east will take their part of the kingdom until there's nothing left. And that leads us right back to the part of chapter 18. In line 33a, you can read, "A man tensed his bow and arrow and accidentally shot the king of Israel in a joint of his armor." And continues with line 34. "The fight was so hard that the king of Israel needed to be in his wagon all day until the evening. And when the sun started to set, he died." And that would be the mark of an end of an era. Have you ever seen the movies in Lord of the Rings? And the fight of Helm's Deep, when you see all the soldiers are standing on the edge of the castle and there are one man that can't hold his bow tense and shoots an orc, and that will be the catalyst of the whole conflict. That was my image when I read that chapter in the second of Chronicles. The people of Judea knew what hardship was, but now it would be even harder. The whole population will be taken for prisoners, and some was transported to the capital of Syria, in Nineveh, on the east bank of the river Tigris, and others to the northern part of Assyria. There are some historical records that speaks of 27,000 people were captured, but in the end it had been a lot more. And to move a country's population to another country requires a highly functioning society in the first place. Anyway, the king of Judea will linger on as a vassal state first to Assyria and later to Egypt. But the final straw will come in 722 BC, when the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar invaded the country, decided to burn down the temple in Jerusalem, and took most of the remaining population as slaves, and only farmers was left alone. Hereafter, I will make it as simple as possible to explain something very complicated conflict that will be the foundation of the conflict that is today in this area. And I'm no historian per se, even though I found history very interesting, so bear with me. One thing I found fascinating about the Bible is that it contradicts itself even many times over. And in a theological perspective, contradictions doesn't necessarily mean something bad. It's just diversity. So back to Jerusalem. The main reason why the temple was built was to have a religious place to worship and to store the Ark of the Covenant. Even though there are places in both the first book of Kings and in the other books that state that God will not live in a house built by humans. And at the same time, if the ground was holy when the building was placed upon, then God will be there. But with the time, the people would turn more adultery than to the God of Moses had talked about, like worship of the sun disk or the god of Baal. And in some cases, the god Baal was a sun disk. What they have in common is monotheism. That means that worshipping or following just one god at a time. So the Hebrew god Jehovah was not a revolutionary or unique in any way. The god Baal is a pretty interesting character and is mentioned throughout both the Old and New Testament and is the base of the name Beelzebub, the devil. But enough of that derailing. Jerusalem will be abandoned after the first temple is burned down, and will be so during most of the 5th century BC. In 539 BC, the Babylonian Empire would be invaded by Persia, and those that had been taken as slaves was pardoned and could return to the homeland, and the temple in Jerusalem will be built for the second time. But that story will I save for later. So I have now just nudged a little bit about the history of Jerusalem and the temple. There are some, of course, more to say about it, but I just want to spark an interesting, maybe we can have a conversation about it. Leave your comments, or don't forget to share and like, and of course subscribe to my channel. And I hope I see you again pretty soon. Bye!